this is a nothing. Yes, did they play perfect? No, they still win. Yes.
What are you doing if the Celtics win the championship?
If the Celtics win championship, I might break my sobriety. I might act up.
We did it! You got him.
All the way.
Celtics versus Heat. Celtics in what?
4.
Celtics versus Knicks. Celtics in
4.
You got Celtics in 4? Hell yeah.
Use a vocab word from a couple years ago. It's mind-boggling.
That's it, GRG. Let's go. What do you think tonight? You think I'm worried about the Warriors? I ain't worried about the Let's Warriors. Go, baby. 18, baby. Load up the boat.
Why would you say that?
Because
I'm not. No, and
he's putting up games like.
Above our head for the players.
Literally right now.
But I think when Marcus, especially Marcus, when he got traded, I think that was a wake-up call.
You think right now
Rob,
it's still New York?
I do.
And when I think of the Celtics dynasty, honestly, one of the first names that comes to my mind is actually Brad Stevens.
Woo. Hold up the W, of course.
Hold it up right there, baby. Yep.
A win is a win. I'm going to categorize that, what we witnessed today, as a win is a win. It wasn't pretty, but again, anytime you can beat the 2023 NBA champions at your place with Nikola Jokic in town, it's a good win, guys. Welcome back into another Celtics Talk Weekly post-game show. I'm your host, Rob Ate, and joining with me are my two co-hosts, Brendan Cox and Seamus Zarling, and a very special guest, Finn Sands, aka the Celtics Insider. Finn, thank you for coming on today. The Celtics today, well, they again narrowly escaped the Denver Nuggets 110-103 after leading by as many as 20 points tonight, guys. Again, Boston without Drew Holiday, who is currently dealing with that mallet finger, in Kristaps Porzingis, who is illness, not COVID related. I don't know why they're still putting down non-COVID, but they're still doing it. So no KP, no Drew. Boston walks away with the win, guys. Again, not the prettiest win, but you know, I'm excited to hear your guys' initial thoughts, reactions, and takeaways, because again, anytime you can beat the Nuggets, right, with Jamal Murray and Jokic playing, it is a positive sign.
Well, this was a game in which the Celtics had to come in and win because the streak was on the line. The nearly 2-year streak of not losing 3 games in a row was on the line today. And really the last couple stretches of games here, you look at the Celtics, they played well before All-Star break. Coming out of All-Star break, they win 3 straight, but a 3-game losing streak right after the Celtics played well for nearly 10-plus games in a row would have been a little bit of a damper on the schedule at this point in time. And the Celtics avoided that today by beating the Denver Nuggets, really washed away their 2 games against the Pistons and the Cavaliers. We can kind of both write off those games for what they were. The Pistons game, it felt like the Celtics were looking towards the weekend. It was the second night of a back-to-back, missing a couple of guys, and we kind of wrote that off saying, okay, young, energetic team at home on a winning streak the Pistons were. Celtics came in, didn't play their best ball. That loss is somewhat explainable. Then you go to the Cavs game, and we could make however many excuses we wanted for that one because we were up 22 at some point in that game. Early on in that game, it was a 25-3 run to start the game for the Boston Celtics, but eventually the Cavaliers chip all the way back, win that game, and we're kind of feeling a little weird about that one because we know how well the Celtics played throughout that ball game, multiple 15-plus point leads in that. And of course, Tatum and Brown had phenomenal nights in the Cavs game, but then they end up losing in the end anyway. And it's just kind of a game that we go, okay, we still feel as if we're above Cleveland in terms of the actual ability of our team winning against Cleveland. That would be the Celtics against the Cavs. But then you came out of that game thinking, all right, 2 losses in a row. You have Denver on Sunday. If you don't respond versus Denver, we might be going back to the conversation, or conversations, I should say, that we were having in January about this team and not being all that consistent. But today, the Boston Celtics came out. Really, both teams looked a little, I would say, lackadaisical early on. It was very evident from the opening tip that both teams were going to be a little bit slow out there because the opening tip went, and you really couldn't even tell the game started. Horford grabbed the open tip, and the Celtics, they're playing double bigs early on. And with Luke Cornett and Al Horford, Horford grabbed that opening tip, and it felt like, oh, was there a call made? Was there something going on? Nobody really moved. And that's kind of how the game went on early on, but the Celtics, they were able to muster that energy and really beat Denver at their own game. The Celtics beat Denver in transition. They really got into the passing lanes, mucked up the passing lanes, as I said last post game, and even saw in person with the Denver Nuggets this past week. If you really get into their passing lanes and really break down their offense from a defensive standpoint, where you're just getting your hands in there, getting deflections, getting out and running, that's when you can really beat the Denver Nuggets, because the Nuggets, they want to play a little bit up tempo. They like to play in half court, but they can still play up tempo. They're one of the best fast break transition teams in the league. But if you can beat them and turn that around at their own game, that's when you're really cruising smooth against the Nuggets. And that's really when the Celtics were cruising smooth against the Nuggets today, is when the Celtics were out there trying on the defensive end of the floor, getting deflections, getting out and running, and really playing at a higher pace. When we saw the game slow down, the Boston Celtics, they just really went and reverted to bad shots. They reverted into dribbling out certain possessions and just really not coming up with the best possessions out there. But there were enough good possessions throughout the game where the Celtics could confidently pull it out in the end and us not have too big of a worry. Yes, the Nuggets came back in this one, but the Nuggets were playing from behind the entire afternoon, and it felt like anytime the Nuggets had a response to what the Celtics had, the Celtics just responded right back with a run of their own and eventually came out with a quality 7-point win in the end. No matter how ugly or pretty it looked, this was an important win to grab if you're the Boston Celtics, especially against a team that, we're talking about Eastern Conference teams, the Knicks, the Cavs, we can face them in the playoffs, but the Denver Nuggets are very much a team the Boston Celtics could see in the NBA playoffs. And now you walk out of the regular season with a 2-0 record against the Nuggets. Not that that's going to mean anything come finals time, but it does give you some confidence that the Celtics, they are maybe a level above the Nuggets right now as the two teams are constructed, even without two starters, in which the Celtics were missing today. Let's note this too. No Aaron Gordon for the Nuggets. So 3 starters in total for both teams out, and this one could look very different down the line. But regardless, great Celtics win on the Garden floor. Finally winning at home. Finally back to winning at home. Let's keep it up, C's.
Yeah, definitely. It's hasn't been too. It's been pretty horrific at home, especially with these Western Conference matchups and the tough East matchups too. Yeah, this is the team that I can definitely see us facing in the NBA Finals this year too. But this game kind of reminded me, different outcome obviously of what happened on Friday, but today's outcome was obviously a win. A little similar of what happened with Cleveland. We kind of had that largely going in like the first half, and then second half just kind of struggling to shoot, and just just so many, like, the turnovers again. It's just like, mind-boggling as well. But yeah, it was like Seamus just said too. It's just a nice, calm 7-point win too. And then obviously we had those clutch shots come at the end from Derek White and then Al Horford as well. So this was just a of course wearing down Jokic a little bit too. But this was definitely a physical game for sure. There was a lot of hard pushing and shoving for sure. So it was good that we got this, and I'm glad we got to prove ourselves and go 2-0 against the team this year. So
when I look at the Denver Nuggets compared to the Boston Celtics, today was a pretty eye-opening game based on the fact that the Celtics are so much deeper than the Denver Nuggets are. Obviously, the Nuggets didn't have Aaron Gordon, and the Celtics were missing KP and Drew. I mean, you just go down the line, though. If you want to cross-cancel the duos, Jokic and Murray, Tatum and Brown, the Celtics just look so much better. I mean, you had guys like Al Horford and Derek White stepping up tonight. And I know Christian Brown, did his thing, but, I mean, you got to be worried if you play the Celtics in a playoff series if you're Denver, because the way the Celtics can throw Al Horford and Luke Cornett at Nikola Jokic and wear him down, I mean, I think there's a level of concern there.
I loved how Boston played Jokic tonight. And you maybe shout out JJ Redick for kind of setting up a framework of how you can go about guarding Nikola Jokic in a 7-game series. And it's never going to be easy. He still put together a hell of a game, 20 points, 14 rebounds, and 9 assists. But this Nuggets team, outside of Murray and, of course, Brown or Braun, I never know. I believe it's Brown. There's not a lot of spot up shooters. Michael Porter's very streaky. Boston kind of lived with that. They, took away the cuts. They took away the lanes, which Jokic loves to find. And they kind of lived with open shots. And as a result, Denver shot 12 of 35 from behind the arc on, I'd probably say 30 of those 35 shots were wide open. And you can live with that. So credit to Boston. Denver is the worst 3-point shooting team in the NBA. They score, or not the worst, I believe, but they score a majority of their points. They're first in interior scoring. And Boston tested them, and they answered the call. So from a Boston standpoint, I won't lie. I loved what I saw from Al. I loved what I saw from Brown and White and Kaida and Pritchard off the bench. But this said more about Denver, I think, than it did about Boston, because I don't think Boston, this has kind of a game where Boston didn't necessarily win it. It kind of felt like Denver almost lost it. I don't know. I'm not super high on this win, but I agree. I do think this shows us something about Denver. This is a team that I think can get there. I don't know if they can get to the mountaintop fully. And the only reason I think they can get there is because they have Nikola Jokic on their team. Guys, let's look at this lead tracker tonight. And again, it was almost a wire win. Fell short just there in that little short stint in that first quarter, guys. But again, a sea of green is like what we like to see. The biggest lead of the night for the Celtics was 20. Denver led by as many as just a measly 1 point. The leads were kind of consistent. As you can see, Boston led, the entire game. Guys, obviously, we've been looking at these lead trackers now for the past, 3 weeks, and it's been a total shift in energy, it felt like. And then there was those 2 random games this past week against Detroit, which, Seamus, you mentioned, we kind of wrote that one off as, you know what, sometimes second out of a back-to-back, you got guys out of the lineup in a Detroit team that was a little bit hungrier that Wednesday night than you. And then you fast forward to Friday, a game where you got missing 2 starters, KP and Drew, but you're up by 20, and that lead tracker just slowly plummets. This is a game that kind of felt like that could have happened again, but Boston was able to hold on. So what did Boston do tonight down the stretch that we liked?
Well, for me, it was really, and I kind of iterated this earlier in the show, is they beat Denver at their own game. And I really do believe, I'm going off of Finn's point, that the Boston Celtics have the bodies to defeat the Denver Nuggets, potentially in a playoff setting, because you look at Denver and specifically what they're good at. They're good at going to Nikola Jokic and him taking over a game. Now, the 2-man game with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic is still very much alive, but a lot of their offense runs through Nikola Jokic as well as Jamal Murray. But Nikola Jokic, looking at him just as an individual, you look at teams out west, what do they ultimately need in order to defeat Nikola Jokic in a playoff series? And what have they been really gearing up to have to defeat Nikola Jokic? It's big guys. And the Celtics have a plethora of big guys on their roster. And you think Kristaps Porzingis, he didn't even play tonight. I mean, he's up there with Jokic in terms of the most efficient paint scorer in the NBA. Kristaps Porzingis and Nikola Jokic, they're at the top of the individual rankings. You don't even have him if you're the Boston Celtics tonight. And yet, Al Horford and Luke Cornett come out and put on defensive masterclasses tonight against Nikola Jokic. And even offensively, too, we see Al Horford was really getting after it in a very vintage Al Horford way. And we'll get into him a little bit later. But you see the 3-point shot, not as big of a factor for Al Horford today. It was more on the interior. That's what made it vintage tonight. But we really beat the Denver Nuggets at their own game with our big guys and just the different multitude styles of play that the Celtics have as well. We've talked about this in the past, specifically talking about it relative to the Cleveland Cavaliers, how the Celtics have more ways to play than the Cleveland Cavaliers. But it did come out on this occasion when the Celtics are missing 2 starters, Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, and they're still able to play a different way to match the Denver Nuggets and Nikola Jokic. And today we saw the Boston Celtics, really Denver, they're great in transition, and they're great at scoring points in the paint. And that can go a little hand in hand, because if you're scoring in transition, you're likely going to the bucket a little bit more, getting those easy opportunities down in low in the interior on the break. And ultimately today, the Celtics are the team who won the transition battle, and they won the points in the paint battle. So you're taking away 2 of the best things that Denver does well within the game and making it an advantage on your side if you're the Boston Celtics. And that's what the Celtics really did well today as a whole. And I think you saw that really persist throughout the moments in which the Celtics did well within the game in that lead tracker, because it wasn't a pretty game by any metric for the Boston Celtics. We saw a 20-point lead. We saw it slip away all the way to 4 at one point. But the Celtics, during those moments in which it was slipping away, the Celtics were turning the ball over. They were playing slow on the offensive end of the floor. They weren't getting after it defensively the way that we know they know how to do. And ultimately, during the stretch of this game, down the stretch of this game, and even the beginning portion of the game in the second quarter there, you see the lead tracker uptick. that's when the Celtics were getting after it defensively, coming up with deflections, running in transition, and really increasing the pace on the offensive end of the floor. And that's when the Celtics were finding open shots, finding their rhythm ultimately as an offense throughout the floor and really going down low as well. And we saw Al Horford and Luke Cornett come up with some easy opportunities and attempts around the bucket. And that's really what made all the difference for the Boston Celtics. And we have to mention this too, just the ability of shot making for the Celtics. I heard somebody somewhere say this, how every team wants to shoot threes, but only some teams are truly equipped to be consistently shooting threes at a volume. That's why we see the Denver Nuggets. They're one of the, in terms of 3-point attempts, they're bottom of the league. They just don't really have the personnel to go out there and jack up a bunch of threes. Whereas the Celtics, if you look at their entire roster, almost everybody can shoot. The only two players they really look at and go, they're probably not shooting the ball whatsoever. I should say 3 players. They're all big men. It's Kada, it's Cornett, who oddly enough, Cornett came in here as a 3-point shooter. I mean, he's one of the best 3-point shooting big men in college history.
Right.
And then Xavier Tillman, who also came in here and tried to be a 3-point shooter, but he just really hasn't worked out as a 3-point shooter. We don't see him that much anyway. But outside of that, mostly everybody on the Celtics roster can take a 3-point shot and hit a 3-point shot. And today, I just thought the Celtics did well at making some of their more wide open 3-point shots. And that's really what we want to see out of this team moving forward, is just them be able to create those good looks and really knock them down, because it's great that we create them. That's the primary goal of an offense, is to create those shots, but secondarily to knock them down at a high clip. At a certain point, really the last 2 games, this is what's so unfortunate about the Cleveland game, I will say, is at both the last 2 games, the Celtics have shot extremely well from beyond the arc and even the field. And the Cleveland loss, if you come out with a win in that game, and this is a great weekend for the Boston Celtics. I would say it's even a great weekend after the 2 results, knowing you did have the 22-point lead in Cleveland. But that's what kind of dampers that win a little bit, or sorry, that game, I should say. That was a loss for the Boston Celtics, is the fact they actually shot well in that game too, and came into today and shot well. And I thought that, along with all the other factors in which I explained, put them just a peg above the Denver Nuggets, and what could eventually put the Celtics a peg above every single team they face in the playoffs come April, May, June. I wanted to say June, but let's face it, that's only the finals. Let's hope we make it there.
Right. Defensively is what did it for me tonight. And they got stops, and their offense went dry. It's gone dry recently. Again, no KP, no Drew. Very ISO-centric between the Jays. I don't hate it. I feel very comfortable with the ball in their hands. It's just kind of what they have to do right now, given the circumstances. But the defense, man, they got stops. They held Denver to 103 points. They've been holding teams. I think that's really been the main factor. Yes, the open 3-point shots are starting to fall again, and that helps, obviously. But for me, guys, the defense won this game for Boston. I mean, those couple of stops they got on the back end with Jokic trying to fire the ball down to a backside dunker spot, Russ, and then the defensively, I think they had a much better game plan tonight. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later, the game planning aspect out of Joe Mazzulla tonight. But for me, in terms of what they did to hold that lead, guys, it was the defense for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I say down the stretch, the 2 things that stuck out to me were obviously the defense, but Derek White too. I mean, Derek White at this point, right? I mean, he's a clutch merchant. With the ball in his hands at the end of the game, I always feel confident that he's going to hit the shot. And I believe he hit 2 shots down the stretch, 2 threes that, and 1 midi that kind of kept their head above the water. And outside of that, they did a great job of getting stops, as you just mentioned. Their ability to collapse on Jokic and force Russell Westbrook or Jamal Murray tough shots to beat them in the clutch was a phenomenal effort by the whole team, honestly. And kudos to Joe for being able to execute that game plan along with the players.
I definitely, I think for sure, like we all know that Derek White has definitely been, our X factor this whole month of basketball, but especially this week as well. Offensively, you've seen it more. I talked about the last week I was on here, like his rebounding game. Hasn't really been much of a hasn't been too consistent as of like these past couple games. But especially when he's trying to get more of his stats up there, but his defense is just what does it for me and for everybody else as well.
Right.
Yeah, well, I want to touch on the defense real quick. I
Yeah.
completely agree with you, Rob, on the defensive end of the floor being a huge factor in this Celtics win because I think we see it a lot with the Celtics defense is when they are actually active and engaged on that end. They're one of the most dominant defensive teams in the entire NBA because of the personnel they have out there and the matchups they can gain. Because ultimately, as an NBA team on an offensive end of the floor, you want to be hunting mismatches. That is the whole goal is you're hunting mismatches against your best offensive players. So whatever system you're in, you are wanting to get the least capable defender on your best offensive player and go to work from there. Or you want to get, a mismatch, whether it's a height advantage, a weight advantage, whatever it is, you want to get that mismatch. The Celtics have the bodies on their roster to be an elite defensive team. And we know this. We know this from the past couple of seasons, and we particularly know it from this season as well in the moments in which they actually get after it and are engaged on the defensive end of the floor. The only thing is the Celtics, they sometimes go through the motions. They sometimes kind of kick their feet back and go, oh, we came up with a couple of good possessions. We can kind of sag off here. And when the Celtics aren't doing that, they are truly an elite defensive team. But in those moments in between, we see that's why I think some of these runs persist for the Boston Celtics against the Celtics, is the Celtics can kind of take their foot off the gas a little bit from a defensive perspective. But when it's on the gas, they're one of the most dominant teams in the entire NBA. They have one of the most dominant defensive backcourts, and which didn't play tonight, honestly, because Drew Holiday wasn't there, and Kristaps Porzingis, him as a deter, as a 7'3" big man, he wasn't out there either. But then you have guys come in like Al Horford, who is just get that man a Forever 21 sponsorship because come on, this guy is just defensively, the athleticism. What really sticks out and what stuck out to me in this game is you look at Nikola Jokic, who could be a 5-time MVP. If he wins this year, you see that Joel Embiid year, it could be a 5-time MVP versus Al Horford. And Al Horford at 38 years old, he's clearly in better shape than Nikola Jokic right now. I mean, Nikola Jokic can play in whatever shape he wants to be in. We've seen that before. But Al Horford out there, I mean, that muscle milk, that is one of the best. That is one of the best investments Muscle Milk has ever made. Is on Al Horford, having him drink the muscle milk on the commercial, because you have people looking at that muscle milk going, "That actually works. That actually works. That actually adds bone marrow to yourself over time and prevents deterioration." Because Al Horford, the athleticism that he brings on the defensive end of the floor at the age in which he is absolutely remarkable. And it's not an every night occasion with Al Horford, but we do see it on some important occasions, some timely occasions. When the moment is big, the spot is big, Al Horford comes out to play. He comes out to play defensively. And it just really adds on. We'll talk more about Al Horford later, but it really adds on to the entire defensive machine the Celtics really have within this team. But I will say, despite the talent defensively the Celtics have, the size defensively the Celtics have, the versatility the Celtics have defensively, it's about their effort. They want to, if they want to be a great defensive team, they have to consistently bring their effort. And I thought we saw that throughout most of today, but we did see it dwindle at some times. And we have seen it dwindle at times this season, which essentially makes the team, if you look at the rankings defensively, it doesn't show, oh, the Boston Celtics, they're first in the league. But we know when they are playing at their highest strength, their full capability, this Celtics team, no team in the NBA matches this team defensively. And that's why we've talked about too on post games of the past, why they need to be leaning on their defense like they did at points today. Because when you're creating stops and the other team can't score, I mean, offensively, offense is important, don't get me wrong. But if you're going through a shooting lull or you're going through an offensive period in which you don't have any rhythm, at least you're getting stops on the other end of the floor and the game is slowed down and mucked up in that way. So the Celtics defensively today were phenomenal. And we want to see more of these phenomenal games out of the Boston Celtics in big spots, because I really think that's when they come out. And that's what kind of shows us this flip the switch type of team.
Right. Yeah. And coming into this real quick, I stated that this Denver game meant more to me than the Cleveland game. I think I stand on that, but I cut you. Didn't mean to cut you off there, Finn.
No, you're good. I was just agreeing with Seamus just on the fact that the switch is definitely real. And I feel like, you look at the past 3 games, we've definitely seen it. You go back to Detroit, Detroit would go up 13. Celtics would tie the game up 5 minutes later. What would happen next? Detroit would go on another run. Look at the Cavs game. Started off 25-3 or something crazy like that. The Cavs come back, right? That switch goes away. You look at the game tonight. The Celtics had their moments where they just dominated, but then the Nuggets just, the switch went off and the Nuggets made their run. So I feel like that's kind of been something we've seen all season where they kind of have this on and off championship switch where it's like, yeah, we know we're really good and we're going to show it. And then other times are like, all right, let's just turn the switch off. We know come playoff time we'll be okay. And I mean, I don't think it's concerning because, we know that this team on any given night can flip the switch in any given moment. They've shown that, they can win on the biggest stage. So I'm not moved by it, but I definitely agree with Seamus on the fact that the switch is definitely real.
My whole thing with the switch is it gets really dangerous if you go into the mentality like that switch has to be on at all times in the playoffs. That is my only concern with it because I agree.
23 playoffs, right? We saw that team definitely had the switch. I think Atlanta took them to game 6. Philly, they took game 1 off because Embiid wasn't playing. Like this core, especially Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum have shown, and I mean, obviously they went down 0-3 to Miami, that the switch can come back to bite them at times. And last year's playoffs, we didn't exactly see that, but we just want to make sure that that's not a habit. So I agree with you on that.
Right, and like my whole thing with like last year, the switch they had it and it was always turned on. Right, it was there was a switch. I mean, they dropped game 2 to Miami in the first round. In game 2 to Cleveland in the second round off of just some pretty impressive shooting performances from the two teams. But like for me, it's like I agree with you guys. I do think there's this switch that Boston can flip, and you see it often. But my only concern is it going to come to bite them in the playoffs because they can't afford to add extra games onto series right now because that is we talk about, and I said this against the Pistons on the postgame show, the only team that can beat the Boston Celtics. Oh, I'm sorry. It was on Celtics Nation Rise podcast. The only team that can beat the Boston Celtics in the East is probably themselves. And that's where the switch comes in. So that's what the only worrisome part. I think what made Boston so good last year was they really hardly were ever flipping that switch during the regular season. It was kind of always up. And it feels like at times that switch has been down a lot this year. And again, there's an aspect to it where you've already won the championship. That pressure is off your shoulders. You understand it a little bit better now. You kind of know at what parts of the year that needs to be on and what parts you can turn it off. But in regards to this game, guys, I came into this game with a lot of questions about can the Celtics beat the Denver Nuggets in 7 games? Is Jokic too good? And I guess, again, kind of like what we said to Cleveland, we really didn't get a real look at what this matchup could look like. Boston missing 2 starters. Obviously, Aaron Gordon's a big piece what the Denver does defensively. But for me, this Nuggets team, I kind of have the reassurance now, like we kind of alluded to at the beginning of the show, they just don't match up with Boston. And it's not the play style that can beat Boston. I think the teams like Indiana, we saw a very competitive 4 games last year. If they had a little bit more experience, that could have been a 6-game series, 7-game series. Cleveland, Oklahoma, those teams that play at a fast pace and have these just immaculate guard play, like the Garlands, the Mitchells, the Halliburtons, the Shea Gildresses, the Jalen, those type of players Boston struggles with. I don't think Boston struggles with the guys like Jokic and the guys like Embiid and the guys like Giannis, where they might be more physically dominating, but I actually believe Boston can do a much better job defensively against those types of guys. I think where things get dicey is kind of like what we saw against, Cleveland, and this is where I want to go with this. The game planning aspect and what Boston did defensively against Cleveland was atrocious. I came on here for about 30 minutes and just ripped into Joe Mazzulla for what a terrible game plan he put together in that 4th quarter. Today, I can come on here and say, Joe Mazzulla, phenomenal job today. You did a great job game planning against Nikola Jokic. So for you guys, is it when you look at the game planning aspect, right, for the Celtics and what they do defensively, is there any concern that there might be some, because how do I say this? Like Mitchell's a guy that has torch Boston historically. You know, we've seen it. These guards really give these guys trouble. Is that a game planning thing, or is that more personnel in terms of what's on there on the court?
Well, it could be both because ultimately the personnel is going to matter from just who you're having guard whoever out there and what type of switches that can muster out on the floor. But it also has to do with game plan and what rotations you're playing out there. I mean, they kind of go hand in hand because we saw in that Cleveland game, Jared Allen was taken out of the game, and I thought from that point on, maybe the Celtics. Maybe they just keep going to the double big lineup. Maybe they try to actually work with it. And it almost was a role reversal switch in that Cleveland game from the standpoint of in the first matchup, it felt like the Celtics had the bodies to go up against the Cleveland Cavaliers with their full healthy roster and could play multiple ways and could play different ways. Whereas the second time around, that Boston game on Friday we just saw from Cleveland, it felt like Cleveland actually had more ways to play because Boston was missing Kristaps and Drew out there, and we're just letting Sam Hauser go out there and die on an island. And we saw from a game planning perspective, Joe Mazzulla, he wasn't about to play guys like Torrey Craig. He wasn't about to play guys off the bench. We talked about Jordan Walsh in that game. Jordan Walsh and Torrey Craig, where were you against the Cleveland Cavaliers? That's what we were really coming in here and saying from that game plan that Joe Mazzulla threw out there. But I think against Denver, to me, Denver, the thing is about them specifically is I do believe with the personnel they've seen swept away from their team in recent years. We think about Contavious Caldwell-Pope and Bruce Brown, the two most notable players. Denver is just very, very thin in the ways they can play. With Russell Westbrook is really one of their only options off the bench. Julian Strawther as well, but he got hurt tonight. Peyton Watson, he's hurt right now. DeAndre Jordan. I mean, really, if you look at all these players, the Nuggets just don't have too much versatility versus the Celtics, who ultimately do, even without two starters out. And that does become thin. We talked about the rotations become thin for the Boston Celtics when two starters are out. Don't get me wrong on that end, but at the same time, still with two starters out, you still have, if you have Kristaps Porzingis out of the lineup, well, the Nuggets are going to keep going to Jokic. They're just not going to take Jokic out of a game, whereas Cleveland, they might take Jared Allen out of a game, and they'll still have Evan Mobley out there, and then you kind of have to mix and match whether you want to go double bigs out there or you don't want to go double bigs. Today, it was much easier to go out there and throw out the double bigs because you knew, well, Nikola Jokic, he's going to come out of the game at some point, but he's still going to be their main factor down the stretch, the last 8 minutes of a game. And I will say about that, I think the Nuggets, they kind of bring Nikola Jokic in late during some fourth quarter occasions, maybe, just saying. Michael Malone might want to bring in Nikola Jokic a little bit earlier sometimes when they're down, just saying. Noticed that recently from them. But with the Denver Nuggets, I think it was easier to game plan against them today than it was to game plan against Cleveland on Friday, which does show me that Cleveland is a legitimate powerhouse in the Eastern Conference to be reckoned with when it comes playoff time. It's the fact, Cleveland all of a sudden with DeAndre Hunter in the lineup, they do have a couple more ways to play now relative to the early portion of the season versus the Celtics, whereas I think the Nuggets, the thing that gives people confidence in the Nuggets coming out of the West is you don't trust any other West team. You know the Nuggets have done it before. They have the best player out of anybody in the West. And those are some of the things that ultimately give people confidence that the Nuggets can come out of the West. But I still think relative to the Cavs and the Nuggets, I think the Nuggets are just a little bit easier to defend because they have less ways to play in general with the lack of depth they have, especially without Aaron Gordon. But the Celtics, from a personnel perspective, I thought they matched up better today with what they had off the bench with Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets versus Friday when you're looking at, Cleveland, you have to match Cleveland with some forwards out there, and you're looking at Sam Hauser. You didn't look at Torrey Craig or Jordan Walsh if you're Joe Mazzulla at all. He was left with Sam Hauser, and Sam Hauser was just an awful option to throw out there. Yet today, you could comfortably take Hauser out of the game and really insert Luke Cornett off the bench, and you had Al Horford as a starter already, which, he's technically a bench player most of the time, but he was a starter today with Kristaps out of the lineup. I think that worked better into the Celtics' favor, into their hands, than it did on Friday against the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Go ahead, Finn. No, you're.
Yeah. No, you got it. You got it.
Okay. I was gonna say, yeah. I definitely think it all comes down to just the like the matchups. Honestly, I mean, Jokic, I'm kind of shocked. This is my personal opinion, though. I mean, he great game, and almost had a triple double, pretty much. I mean, it's tough to stop the guy, obviously, though. But I think it's just to when Rob was asking, like the personnel thing. For me, it's the matchup wise, and I just there's some guys we obviously don't know who are just going to pop off in general, though. But like I always just watch out for those stars, and especially. Jokic was one that we were worried about today, especially though. But I also thought like Jamal Murray too. It was kind of looking to see what Derek White was going to be able to get out of him. But he was the leading scorer, Jamal Murray today for Denver's side. So
Right.
for me, I just never know like when it'll happen for like the guys to just step up and pop out from the other sides.
Mhm. Yeah, when it comes to Joe Mazzulla's game planning and you look at the personnel, something that I don't really get concerned with. Like I'll tell you right now, I know we were shorthanded against the Cavaliers, but I guarantee you that Joe Mazzulla did not cook up his best game plan defensively for that game, and that was intentional. You don't want to give away all your chips before the playoffs, and that's a fact. When the playoffs roll around, and Drew Holiday comes out of the hyperbolic chamber, friggin' ready to give you 35 minutes a night of straight defense. That's just a completely different story. And so when it comes to that, I'm not exactly moved. Also, you just look at Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, the switchability between those guys. We saw tonight on any given night, Al Horford can show up defensively. And for the most part, if teams are targeting Sam Hauser, unless he's having a really bad defensive night, I mean, Hauser Island's real. Like the numbers point to Sam Hauser being a good defender. So I'm overall not too concerned about that.
My whole thing with the Sam Hauser and teams attacking him, Hauser, and I said this against Cleveland, Hauser is a good defender when he has backside help. When there is a rim protector down there that he can rely on to have his back, Hauser is a very serviceable defender. There wasn't that backside, weak side help against Cleveland, and he just got torched. I won't lie, we got a little conspiratorial on last post-game show about the Cleveland matchup. And was this something I pointed out was that 2023 matchup against the Sixers late in the year, where they kind of did the same thing. They just played Embiid straight up for 48 minutes and he scored 50. Could it be that? Yes. I'm not worried about can Joe Mazzulla cook up a game plan for 48 or for a 7-game series. My whole thing with Joe is he's just not a great on the fly adjustment guy. We're 2.5 years, I believe now, or 2 and like 3/4 into the Joe Mazzulla tenure. And that is something I would have liked to see him pick up by now. He's still a young head coach, obviously, still has a lot of room for growth. But in my eyes, it all comes down to what the game plan looks like, because obviously you need serviceable defenders out there, right? But at the end of the day, defense is, in my eyes, like a chess match. That is really where, and it comes out like in the playoffs. The regular season is the checkers, postseason is the chess, and I think we saw that from Joe all last playoffs. So I don't think this is not me coming on here and saying, oh, Joe Mazzulla is going to be the reason the Celtics are going to lose the championship or not make it or not, get it done. And that, I'm calling for him to be fired. I'm not saying any of that. But what I am saying is that a home game against Cleveland on, a Friday night for that to potentially keep us in the running for the 1 seed, would I like to see a little bit more out of that? Maybe go somewhere else. I think absolutely. But again, here we are against Denver just 48 hours later, and Joe Mazzulla, he comes back and he puts together a great game plan. So I don't know.
I'll add on to that too in terms of the matchups on Friday and today, the Cavs and the Nuggets. Drew Holiday not playing within that matchup on Friday was bigger than it was today. Kristaps Porzingis not playing against Nikola Jokic, because when you have Drew Holiday out there, you have your 2 primary defenders on Garland and Mitchell. It's Holiday, it's Derek White. And then after that, you have Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum as well. And then whoever your big guys out there, that's really going to be the mismatch that they hunt, or the Cavs would hunt out there with Garland or Mitchell. When Drew Holiday doesn't play in that matchup, who's replacing Drew Holiday in the starting lineup? Well, it's Sam Hauser. And not necessarily saying that Sam Hauser is replacing Drew Holiday, because on the defensive end of the floor in terms of the matchups, because most likely you're going to have a guy like Jaylen Brown take over his defensive assignments, or rather Derek White take over his defensive assignments, and then Jaylen Brown takes over Derek White's assignments, Tatum, so on and so forth down the line until you get to, the mismatches down there with Sam Hauser and whoever the big guy is. So on Friday, if you look at that game, Drew Holiday not playing, I thought was actually bigger in terms of the result of that one. Garland and Mitchell getting what they wanted. Garland more so throughout the game. Mitchell really having a great performance, 41 points on Friday. But then today you look at it and go, well, Kristaps Porzingis is not in the lineup. Nikola Jokic is still out there. Yet you have Al Horford and Luke Kornet come into the game and start mucking things up. Even Keita was actually phenomenal in terms of his presence today, just down low as a physical body. And that's really what you need as an NBA team if you're going to take on the Denver Nuggets, is you need big physical bodies. Otherwise, Nikola Jokic, he's one of the best post players in NBA history in terms of just scoring the ball. He really can be a scorer down low. That's what makes his game just phenomenal, and him a nearly 5-time MVP is not only can he distribute for others, and that's really the main facet of his game, it's the fact he can actually be a dominant post scorer down there as well. And if you don't have the big bodies to go up against Nikola Jokic, well, number one, he's going to pick you apart from the low post, but secondly, he's going to go out there and score on you. Yet today, the Celtics, they were able to throw Al Horford out there. They were able to throw Luke Kornet out there. They were able to throw Keita out into the mix as well, even without Kristaps out of the lineup. And that was not as big of a deficit with Kristaps out as it was on Friday when you have Drew Holiday out of the lineup. And then you're starting to look at guys like Sam Hauser come off the bench, Peyton Pritchard, to guard guys like Mitchell and Garland out there. That's a way tougher task for the Celtics to go and cover up than it is today against the Denver Nuggets and Nikola Jokic, when you have the defenders off the bench that you feel comfortable with coming in there and just being physical. They don't have to be the best defenders in the entire world, but if they're physical rebounders who can really make things tough on Jokic, whether it's passing the ball or scoring the ball, that is when you're really deterring the Denver Nuggets. Versus on Friday against the Cavs, you're sending Sam Hauser out there, and he's not going to be the primary matchup on Garland or Mitchell, but when they get those mismatches and those switches onto Sam Hauser, I mean, they were just cooking him. We saw it the fourth quarter, or the whole fourth quarter on Friday. And I think that's what is to also be said about these two occasions is Friday, the Drew Holiday deficit on Friday was just much, much bigger than the Kristaps Porzingis deficit today, or even both of their deficits today. I think, you even think about the Nuggets guard play. I mean, it's Jamal Murray. He's not exactly the quickest guard anymore, but he's very shifty, can get downhill, can get his looks, can get into that jumper, that mid-range jumper. But outside of him, Russell Westbrook, Christian Brown, just not too many ball handlers on the Denver Nuggets roster that you're really concerned with, which makes Drew's absence a little lesser than it was on Friday.
Yes. I couldn't agree with you more on the Drew Holiday facts, just based off his importance in a series against a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers. I mean, he changes the dynamic completely. Right, you put him in the starting lineup, that series could come down to who plays better between him and Evan Mobley. I mean, Evan Mobley's the guy on the Cavs that concerns me the most, just because when he wants to, it feels like he can give you 25 and 10. So when Drew Holiday plays against the Cavs, it's a completely different game. So when you have Drew on Evan Mobley, it makes the Celtics offense look completely different, because now you have Evan Mobley forced to guard on the perimeter more, and that opens up the lane for Tatum and leads to Derek White threes. Like when the Celtics beat the Cavs, I think, what was it, 2-3 weeks ago now, Derek White was letting the threes fly, and that was just because Evan Mobley was not, adequate to guard. And I think come playoff time, Drew Holiday would be the ultimate game changer on both ends of the floor.
You also Seamus, I agree with you in the other sense of, you look at what you have off the bench from a Boston standpoint. The guard play is off the bench is really one, it's Peyton Pritchard, and that's it off, in terms of what you can throw, in terms of bodies you can throw at somebody in a 7-game series within your rotation. It's White and Holiday, which, mind you, two great bodies to throw at perimeter defenders, right? But outside of that, if, say, it's a regular season game and one of them's out, where do you go defensively? Springer, right? He's no longer here. He's now in Utah. You really don't have bodies where you can put on a defender. And even in the forward spot, You have Walsh, who is a body, but offensively, Walsh hasn't shown you he's really capable of performing at what we need him to perform to make that defense, worth it. And then Sam Hauser is out there, right, not to be a defensive stopper. He's out there to space the floor and knock down shots. So I agree in terms of bodies you can throw at people when guys are in and out of the line. I talk about it all the time. When one guy goes out, it's okay. You can get the job done. When two of the starters go out, the roster really thins out and what we can, in terms of versatility, what we can do. Tonight, when you're playing a big man, you got Luke, you got Nemi, you got Al Horford. Like, you have these very capable, good defenders in these bodies you can throw at them. And Al, he walked away with the SeatGeek player spotlight, guys. We have to give, Al Horford his flowers today. Shout out to Jaylen Brown, though. Jaylen Brown had himself a phenomenal afternoon, but man, Al Horford. It was a vintage Al Horford game, guys. But before we talk about Al Horford, I just want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of the post-game show, SeatGeek. Guys, the playoffs are right around the corner, and SeatGeek has you covered for the best prices on the market. Head over to the SeatGeek app and at checkout, use code Celtics Weekly for $20 off your first purchase. Again, the link to that will be in the description down below. Guys, let's talk about Al Horford going band for band today against the three-time MVP Nikola Jokic. Guys, in today's matchup, Al had 19 points, 8 rebounds, 3 steals. He was a +4 on the box plus-minus, a very efficient 7 of 12 from the floor, guys. Al, it felt like he made all the winning plays, and this is exciting because Finn kind of mentioned the hyperbolic chamber with Drew Holiday, which I think that's super real. I think Drew Holiday is coasting through the regular season, but Al Horford's another guy where you look at in the past 3 weeks, we saw it in the Cleveland matchup on the road against Garland and Mitchell and his switchability. Today, he did it again. He picks out a random game that's a big game, that's a marquee matchup, and he comes in at 38 years old, guys. He delivers a signature performance at home today.
Al Horford, we talked about it in December and January, where Al Horford, just a complete mess offensively out there, complete mess. And really, the Celtics, I will say, were using him in a way that I would say preserves his body. They weren't making him bang in the post too much. They weren't making him go down low and be that low post passer. They were really making him be that just spot up shooter from beyond the arc, whether it was on the wing or in the corner. Al Horford was shooting the 3 ball prolifically. And that's what ultimately makes this performance this afternoon so impressive for Al Horford, is the fact Al Horford was 7 of 12 from the floor, but only 1 of 3 from 3, which means he was 6 of 9 from 2. And this is what makes it a vintage Al Horford performance, as he goes up against a near 5-time MVP in the league in Nikola Jokic, and Al Horford takes it to him physically and gets his points down low. That is not something we've seen from Al Horford all season, and it feels like it's not something we've seen consistently out of Al Horford for a couple of seasons now. That's not necessarily a bad thing because the Celtics don't always need that, but when it comes around, it's a huge advantage to the Boston Celtics. And Al Horford, to be doing this at the age in which he is just spectacular. It needs to be talked about a little bit more in the league. It doesn't do this consistently, but just the little help that he can bring that to this Celtics team, it almost reminds you of something like how Andre Iguodala was with the Golden State Warriors, where he might not have always been the effective player, but sometimes he could come out there and give them some good minutes as an older player. I think Al Horford, he's almost going beyond that ascension for the Boston Celtics at this point in time. And I kind of iterated it earlier with Al Horford, is his defense. Defensively, Al Horford, his athleticism, his ability to move his feet defensively, his ability to get those deflections. I talked about the deflections so many times in this post game already, but Al Horford, he came up with 3 of them today. Came up with 3 of them, and that really is what led the Boston Celtics to getting out in transition, really getting the crowd up and going. I've mentioned that on some post games recently, where the crowd just needs to get under the Celtics just a little bit. Celtics need to get under the crowd as well, give them something to cheer for. Today, Al Horford coming out and showing out defensively, got the Celtics running in transition a little bit, got the crowd going, and eventually led to the win overall for the Boston Celtics. But Al Horford, he did the work on both ends of the floor. He was super efficient on the offensive end, did a lot of things that we haven't seen from him in a long time, and defensively too, came up with those deflections, came up with those steals, and those 19 points. You look at the final results, only a 7-point game. Al Horford, he's not a 19-point per game scorer in any means whatsoever. Usually the 2 players off the bench, when they give you something offensively, Al Horford and Sam Hauser, when those two players are giving you something off the bench, it's usually something that we gawk at and go, oh, wow, we actually got something out of these two players from a point scoring perspective tonight. And Al Horford was that player for the Boston Celtics, coming up with 19 points in the end. And that graphic was perfect. One vintage Al game, because that's exactly what it was in this big spot. He does have a couple of these on the season, I will say, in some big spots, which has to get us a little excited come playoff time, knowing this is the Al Horford that could be around on a gamely basis.
This was definitely I'm so impressed with how Al Horford has been as of late, especially. But this was definitely his best game this season for sure. I mean, it was definitely there's no better game to do it than against the Nuggets for sure. I mean, just defensively, like we talked about too, his steal numbers as well. It's just good to see. This is the Al Horford, and like Seamus just said too, I want to see this Al Horford in the playoffs this year, because no matter if he's going to be starting, if we have some guys out, knock on wood, or coming off the bench too, he can be that guy that we need to, that can come up in key plays for sure.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a reason that Jason Tatum said his favorite teammate of all time is Al Horford, right? I got a stat that I thought was pretty mind-blowing. Players with 19 points, 8 rebounds, and 3 steals at age 38 or older. So you have Al Horford today, and then the other guys on the list, you have Kareem, Tim Duncan, LeBron, Michael Jordan, Karl Malone, Hakeem, Robert Parrish, and Kevin Willis. I mean, I feel like that says it all, right, guys? Like, Al Horford's ability to be timeless and timely for the Celtics in any given moment has been special, and it's not something we're just seeing now. It's something we've seen throughout his tenure as a Celtic, and to see him be so effective at age 38 has been truly amazing. So I like what you guys have said about him so far, and shout out OG.
He is the definition of whatever he can give you is always a positive. Al Horford is really never going to take, except Cleveland, because again, but we're talking fully healthy Celtics. He is never really going to take away from the game. He hardly ever makes mistakes. His knowledge, year 18, he's 38. He is just so sound defensively and offensively. Seamus, you nailed it. What we saw in December and January, that's not the Al Horford we're going to see in the playoffs. That is the preserve Al Horford. That is the, okay, you're open, shoot the ball, right? Yes. Is Al Horford going to be in the mix from behind the arc? Absolutely. He plays for the Joe Mazzulla offense and the Boston Celtics that shoot the ball at a historic rate. He's going to shoot threes, and he's going to make a lot of threes come playoff time. But tonight, he had 19 points on one made 3-point field goal. He was banging down low. That is the Al Horford we were accustomed to watching, like back in 2016, the 2022 NBA playoffs. That's the Al. And if we can get that, even just for one game, a playoff series, right? Give it to us one game. If you can do something like this, Al Horford, the Celtics are going to be looking very, very good tonight. He had did a phenomenal job defensively on Nikola Jokic. That switch in the fourth quarter where he was on Jamal Murray, and Murray tries to go to the left side baseline to get that fadeaway off, and he goes up, and you realize Al Horford's breathing down his neck, and he tries to pass it, and Horford tips it, which eventually leads to the 3-on-1 break when the Al Horford finish and kind of the nail in the coffin. But like, those are the plays that you don't see 38-year-olds making. That the two-way, he's going to get the stop on defense, he's going to run and get back on offense, and he's going to finish it off. 5 years ago, he finishes it off with a dunk and not a layup. But again, 2 points is 2 points. And Al, Seamus, I love that. What we saw in December and January, don't expect that in the playoffs. Al Horford can bang down low with the best of them still, and he showed that tonight.
Yeah, I think these Al Horford performance too, I mean, they come out in timely moments. I mean, really one performance that sticks out to me from this season is the Golden State Warriors game defensively from Al Horford. It felt like in that game, Sunday afternoon, MLK Day, or I guess Monday afternoon, it was MLK Day. That game against the Golden State Warriors on TNT, big spot, Al Horford came out and was a dominant defensive player in that game, and the Warriors only scored 39 points in the first half of that matchup. And really, Al Horford, it feels like when the moment is big, he comes out and shows up. We think about the Cleveland game from a couple of weeks ago. In that game, he was so large, and we came in here and talked about him then too. And tonight, or rather today, against the Denver Nuggets, it's a game where you're facing another big man who is nearly a 5-time MVP. He's going to be a 4-time MVP after this season. He could have won that one Joel Embiid MVP, let's be honest here. He's basically a 5-time MVP in Nikola Jokic. Al Horford comes out, and you can still see his competitive spirit out there. We've seen a lot of players retire in the past, citing, I didn't really have a want to play anymore. I'm really not interested in playing anymore. I didn't have that same competitive spirit within me to go out there and play a full 82 games or really go through the entire routine to want to play. Well, Al Horford at 38 years old still has that competitive spirit because you can see it come out in nights and games like this where Al Horford, he's going up against another dominant big man in the league. Al Horford knows he's fallen from grace in terms of being a dominant all-star big man in the league. He understands that. He understands what point of his NBA career he's at, but he still understands where he came from and what he's done in the past and what he can still do out there on a basketball court. And when he can bring that to the Celtics on a big occasion, that's when the Celtics can get a real nice boost out of Al Horford. And I really think it's going to be shown more so in the playoffs than anything else because every single night in the playoffs is a tough physical battle. And every game just gets more and more intense as the playoffs go along. Every game becomes more and more important. And Al Horford in those important situations, those big game situations, Al Horford comes up, steps up to the plate, and he comes out swinging. And that's Al Horford's one of his best attributes at 38 years old is outside of all the skill on the floor, it's the fact that he actually comes out, he cares about these games, he's competitive, and he can bring the Celtics a big boost in big spots. And that's what Al Horford did today against the Denver Nuggets in a matchup that called for Al Horford to go and play like he did today.
I'm sitting there watching this game today, and I'm thinking to myself, is this it for Al? Do we think this is the last? Is this his last hurrah, or do we see a potential Udonis Haslem role coming up in the future where maybe he's not playing but he's still on the bench? Or is this
out those minimums?
Because I thought last year was it for him. I thought the title was exactly how he was gonna hang him up, but I think he saw an opportunity. I think one, he still has juice left in the tank, and he's showed that today. And I think he also saw an opportunity to not just get one ring, to get 2 rings. And then if he gets 2 rings, you maybe are sniffing the Hall of Fame. So are you guys, is this it for Al, or what do we think?
I mean, if it is, I'm not ready for it. Just like in, like another sport, like I'm not ready for the John Cena farewell tour, like on the WWE side, but for Al Horford, especially though, I don't know. And, I like what Rob just said too, the Udonis Haslem role, like, where he, isn't really going to be able to just kind of play. It's almost like how, like James Johnson does it too, kind of, and like how Tristan Thompson as well too. But this is Al Horford. What's that?
Taj Gibson,
yeah. Right.
I didn't even know he's still in the league.
Yeah,
I think it's in the Hornets. Yeah, I think he might have been actually playing though for sure a couple weeks ago when like they had guys out. Wow. But yeah,
no,
that's another story.
Taj Gibson, get in.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But yeah, as for Al Horford, I mean, I think it has to just depend on like the playoff run we have. And when I say that, I mean, if we have a good stretch, then I think maybe he'll just decide maybe, I think just keep going. But, I think maybe if it's just like the stretch we have, it's just not good and we just end up making it like past the semifinals, then, I mean, you got your ring. You put your heart into this game. I mean, it wouldn't hurt to hang it up, obviously, but I think that he wants to just keep winning until, he gives out. But I mean, obviously it's time will tell, but I'm not ready for it yet. But still, Al Horford especially is, probably our heart and soul right now. Now we don't have Marcus Smart, but I mean, it's, I still think that Al can definitely bring a lot more than he can right now. So we'll see.
Yeah. Rob, I thought he was going to retire after winning the chip last year.
Oh,
too,
I thought it was a shoo-in.
Yeah, but when I heard that he was coming back for more, it kind of just told me that as long as the Celtics have that championship window, and it's currently wide open, right? Al Horford's going to stay, and not only is the Celtics championship window open, his ability to contribute is still open. So I think that he'll be around next season too.
Okay.
And I think that when Al Horford eventually hangs it up, I feel like we'll really start to see it. Like, I think that the Celtics will start giving, I don't know if Kate is the future, but start giving other guys all his minutes, and Al will start to kind of pivot into a lesser role than he is right now, and he'll eventually go off into the sunset. But I mean, Al Horford's still contributing on a championship level right now, so there's nothing that's pointing towards retirement, I feel like.
Well, it's like the Tom Brady, the LeBron James, the Chris Paul,
the Al Horford
story. Really, if you're still playing at a high level and you're still contributing, like you just said, Finn, at a high level to a championship level team, why would you want to stop? If you feel comfortable playing every other night, you're not in pain, which clearly Al Horford's not right now. If he's not in pain, if he's comfortable, if he's contributing, why would he need to stop? And then all of a sudden, you're over 40. I mean, that's where Brady found himself nearly midway through his 40s, still playing. He was playing well. He kept playing well. And that's ultimately when you're playing well and you're comfortable playing well, what's the reason to stop exactly? And Al Horford, that's where I see with him right now. There's no reason to stop. Even after last season, it's like, oh, yeah, he's 37, 38 years old. He just won a chip finally, 17th, 18th season in the NBA. But if he's still contributing to the Boston Celtics and he was still playing at a high level last playoff run, I mean, that game 5 against Cleveland, he's the one who put the dagger in Cleveland's heart last year in game 5 in that series at home. And Al Horford, the fact he's still contributing the way he is right now, there's just no reason on my end. I don't see a reason as to why he would retire other than just, oh, well, I played 17, 18, 19 seasons. Well, I might as well just hang it up. That to me, that Al Horford, the way he is wired, that doesn't strike me as something that he would ultimately do. Just look at his years and go, I'm done. I think he would have to feel it, whether it's in his competitive spirit or whether it's in his actual physicality within his body. I think he's going to have to actually feel it in some way, whether he's kind of reached a point where he realizes, oh, I'm not on a competitive team or we're not competing anymore, or reach a point where he's thinking, oh, physically, I'm just not up to this task anymore. I think it has to get there first for Al Horford before he considers retirement. And that could be potentially 1, 2 more seasons, 3 more seasons down the line. We don't really know what the full capabilities of Al Horford are at this given moment. We just kind of assume, oh, based on the years, based on the championships, can he go out like Peyton Manning? Well, Peyton Manning went out. He had to go out. He either was going to win or lose that Super Bowl. He was going out either or. His arm was going out. Al Horford's arm and his entire body, it ain't going out yet. And I think Al Horford, that kind of sets the precedent for him playing a little bit longer than we might think. And that's what set the precedent for guys like Tom Brady, LeBron James, and even Chris Paul to play longer than we've all thought, because they just kept winning. They kept contributing to their teams and they felt comfortable doing so. And that's what it looks like Al Horford is doing right now with the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, I think the playoffs are going to be a big tell. I do think there's an aspect for Al is, can I put together a full playoff run, right? Because it's one thing to do it in the regular season where you're missing back-to-backs, but like, can I put together a 2-month stretch of 20 games or so of really competitive high-level basketball? I personally think he still can. And I don't know. I'm sitting there and I'm thinking like he's 38. But I mean, you guys make some compelling arguments. I mean, Chris Paul's 40 right now, and he's still playing at a high level. Obviously, you see what LeBron's doing, and it's just ridiculous what he's averaging 26 at 40. So, I mean, you're starting to see it a little bit more in sports with these guys playing for a little bit longer into their 40s. I mean, if Al can give us 2 more years, that is special, especially because we thought we got the Al Horford replacement that didn't work out in Xavier Tillman. So, that is it is interesting, and I agree with you, Brendan. I'm not ready for the day Al Horford decides.
There's a lot more work to do. I'll tell you that right now. There's a lot more work to do because I think we just need to finish this year again, just like we said last year after the Indy game. The vision's clear. We know what we have to do. We got to finish this, and I'm sure he wants that same mindset as well going into when we go to the postseason. But not to jump ahead, but still.
No, but that's a good point, because you honestly look at the complexion of this roster, and there are some in a year from now, maybe even this offseason, 2 years. There's some holes you're going to have to fill, and some big ones. Drew's 35, Al's 38. Like, the window is right now, right? These next 2-3 years are super big. Celtics got to capitalize. Talk about capitalizing, guys. The Celtics have 5 more games at home on this 2-week homestand. And really the only game that I have circled on my calendar is that Lakers game, March 8th on Friday, 8:30 start time. I'm going to say it again. Shame on you, NBA. Why are you doing that to us? Or next Saturday, I believe. Next Saturday. I apologize. Other than that, though, guys, these next 4 out of these next 5 games, or I'm sorry, Oklahoma as well. That will be the 12th as we close out the homestand. So Oklahoma and LA. Other than that, Portland, Utah, and Philly. So you got these next 5 games, guys. How do you see this playing out for the Celtics?
Let's go 5-0. Can we go 5-0? That'd be great. I mean, I know it's like the upper echelon of expectations, but can we go 5-0 on the homestand? Or really, it wouldn't be 5-0 on the entire homestand. We would have that loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers, of course, at the beginning. But I want to see the Celtics win at home, and I think there's going to be in that Laker game that show up. I mean, we saw the Celtics and Lakers play about a month ago. The Celtics didn't even show up to that rivalry game. Now you have the Lakers' next superstar on the roster in Luka Doncic, and he's going to eventually take over the reins from LeBron James in that Laker organization. That's his first appearance at the TD Garden. Luka's first appearance at the TD Garden will be his first appearance, number one, as a Laker, and his first appearance since last year's NBA Finals in Game 5. I don't want to see the Celtics come out with lackadaisical effort in that Laker game. I don't want to see them come out how they played against the Lakers a couple of weeks ago in Los Angeles. I want to see the Celtics show up and show everyone that this is still a big rivalry in the NBA, because we all aesthetically, we look at it and go, well, this is a rivalry game where we got to show up for this. This is a big game. But then sometimes the Celtics show up, or even the Lakers in the past have shown up and went, and it's just another game. We don't want to see that as NBA fans. We want to actually feel the rivalry persist. And I know these teams only play really twice a year because they never meet in the NBA Finals anymore, which you never know. Could happen this season, just saying.
They're the 2 seed right now.
Later on down the line, just saying. But ultimately, the Celtics and Lakers, I want to see the Celtics actually show up to that game with a different energy, because it should be a different energy they're bringing against the Los Angeles Lakers at home. Same thing with the Thunder a couple nights later. Otherwise, those other opponents, those should all be wins. I mean, Philadelphia, they're tanking at this point in time. Philadelphia is not even somebody I'm looking at going, whoa, are they a play-in team? No, Joel Embiid's out. Paul George is still playing, but he's probably going to be eventually shut down for the season at some point within the next 2 weeks, as well as Joel Embiid, who's already been shut down. That Philly team, do we have to look out for Quentin Grimes now? Is that really what we're having to do after last night?
After last night's 44 points, I don't know.
Right, against the Warriors. I mean, the Philly team, there are some competitors on that Philly team we still have to look out for, but that's a game the Celtics should win. I mean, they just beat Philly by 20. They just came back from a 26-point deficit late in the third quarter against Philly, and that's a game the Celtics should ultimately win. Portland and Utah. Portland can be a little frisky, and I will say Utah can be frisky on some occasions, but those are both games the Celtics should go into and come out with a win. And let's shout out Utah and somebody on Utah real quick. I mentioned Jaden Springer earlier in this program. Jaden Springer, a new 3-year deal with the Utah Jazz. So Danny Ainge giving Jaden Springer a little bit of a payday. Now, some of that is non-guaranteed later on down the line, but Jaden Springer revenge game in Boston, kind of feeling it. I think it's in the cards for us coming up. But regardless, the next 5 games at home, the Celtics, there's 2 definitively tough opponents in the Lakers, the Thunder. Celtics should come out with different energy in those games. But the other 3 games, take care of business at home. Give the crowd something to cheer about. Really get that crowd behind you and under you in those games, because the Celtics, I have a feeling there will be portions in the games against the Blazers, the Jazz, the Sixers, where the Celtics aren't playing up to par, but they have to bring their energy for when they are playing in those games to actually come out with wins. And those are really the 3 games that I look at and go, those should undoubtedly be wins. And then against the Lakers and the Thunder, those are 2 games that I just think the Celtics have to have different energy in, because the national media, all the media out there, they're going to hype up those 2 games. We saw the hype behind the Celtics Thunder game the first time around, and even against the Lakers the first time. But this time against the Lakers, it'll include Luka Doncic in his first game as a Laker at the TD Garden. First game at the TD Garden since the finals last year. And in those games, I don't want to see the Celtics just roll over like we've seen a couple times this season, which we think are now in the past for the Celtics team. We think about December, late December, and the entirety of January. We think those runs are in the past, where the Celtics are going back and forth, not giving energy on a nightly basis. I think this test coming up here, the 5 games at home, the Celtics can go 4-1 or 5-0 on the road trip, or sorry, not road trip, on the homestand. Rather, we're always used to talking about what they can do on road trips, but on the homestand, if the Celtics can achieve a record where they're either 4-1, they lose one of the two, the Laker or the Thunder game, or they just go 5-0. I think we're definitely giving this team more and more confidence on top of the confidence we're already gaining for this team right now, that they can be the team that goes back-to-back finally for the first time in the last, 6 seasons now in the NBA.
Yeah, I'm sick of going on Twitter and kind of just seeing like the Celtics aren't a good home team. And I mean, the numbers back it up, right? They're better on the road. Oh, they're the road dogs. But I mean, let's just be assertive at home. Let's get some home wins. A good stretch of basketball at home at this time of year is really important. Not only for confidence, but just for lineup purposes, strategy. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. So, I mean, I definitely want to see some wins, but I'm also looking at, the Trailblazers game and the 76ers game. Jason Tatum has gotten a lot of burn recently, and it would be nice if we could have one of these games where he just doesn't have to play the fourth quarter. I mean, I know Jaylen Brown's been kind of banged up, so, I mean, same with him. I think a guy like Derek White could use it too. So, I mean, the Celtics kind of, in the Cleveland game and today, they showed that at times they struggle to hold leads and let teams go on runs. So it would be nice if they could just blow one of these games open, have the starters sit out the fourth quarter, and just get some much needed rest.
I'm here's the thing. I don't know what to expect because the Celtics are at home. So what do I want? 5-0. Of course I want 5-0. What am I expecting? I believe they'll handle business against the Sixers, against the Blazers, and against Utah. I believe that's 3 wins right there. I'm going to give them one of the 2 wins against either Oklahoma and LA. Which one do I think is more important? Call me crazy. The LA Lakers. I think that Lakers game is much more important. Seamus, you said it. And maybe I'm just getting a little bit too into narratives these days, right? But it's Luka Doncic here, rolling back into the TD Garden for the first time since the Celtics and the Mavericks played in the NBA Finals. And he's wearing purple and gold. And who's his running mate? Is LeBron James. So, yeah, your 2 stars are in a finals rematch and he's wearing purple and gold. Is that not a little Bird Magic-esque? Yeah, you win that game. Nationally broadcast, 8:30 at TD Garden. Kind of the first time in since Kobe and KG and Pierce were going at it, that the Celtics and Lakers, they're both good and they're rivals and it's competitive and it could be fun. So I'm really circling that game this week. As a game that I really, really, really want to see Boston come out and win, especially with what you noted, Seamus, how terribly that last outing in LA went for the Celtics. I mean, they didn't show up. And in regards to the Oklahoma City game, that's another game. Seamus talks about it all the time, that 14-point lead that we held against the Oklahoma City Thunder on the road, or 15.
That first half, it was just
first half against Oklahoma
of the season.
So I do think those are 2 really important games. Lock in. And Finn, I agree. Tatum kind of looked gassed tonight. Right? He's been phenomenal. He looked a little gassed. Even if you want to shut him down for a night against a Philly or a Utah or a Portland, I'd personally pick Utah. Portland's kind of picking up some steam here. They're winners of the last 4. Yeah. They're like kind of playing some competitive basketball right now.
One's good.
Yeah, you cannot roll over against that Portland team because they will come in and make some noise. Same with Philly. So I wouldn't take them out against them. I would hold Tatum out against Utah. Utah is trying desperately to keep tanking and losing games. So prediction-wise, I'm going to, from the heart, say 5-0 because I'm always going to say that. But I could see them dropping a game 4-1. I don't know what you think, Brendan.
Honestly, I was right with you because I was actually going to say the exact same thing with your Lakers take, though. Like, prime time. Luka's back. He could add on to this rivalry with LeBron. And like Seamus was saying too, we probably will think that when LeBron hangs it up, Luka's going to be their next star. And Luka's still in the prime of his career, even though he just got traded and we thought he was going to be back in Dallas for like a decade at least, because he was probably going to be like their next franchise star. But, this homestand for sure is just important, I think, definitely to, see if we need to rest our guys, because like you just said too, Tatum was not looking too good, offensively tonight. But I mean, numbers wise, obviously was okay, but scoring wise, not so much. But, he probably was feeling the effects of that last game from Friday when, we were just trying to, capitalize with the win. But yeah, this definitely is going to be a really, really important homestand. I like to go at least 4-1. Yeah. But, I think if maybe, the only team that I'm worried about is probably going to be the Lakers, just because of, LeBron being in the town, and Luka probably just trying to, going to be unguardable as well. So that is just stuff we're going to see how that goes.
I'll add one more thing onto the whole Laker conversation here. LeBron's first game as a Laker first game as a Laker against the Celtics at the TD Garden came back in February of 2019 on trade deadline day. Does anybody remember what happened at the end of that game?
Do you want me to say?
Failed offensive rebound, right? Brandon Ingram goes up for the layup. Failed offensive rebound by the Celtics, and it falls right into Rajon Rondo's hands.
Yeah, I remember
he
that.
just shoots the ball. It goes in as the buzzer sounds, and that's legitimately one of the worst Celtics memories I've ever come across, ever. And it included LeBron James. Some of the other ones include LeBron James as well. But LeBron James's first game as a Los Angeles Laker on the Garden floor ended in a Rajon Rondo buzzer beater. And Rajon Rondo, the why this is so personally crushing, he was my favorite player growing up. Straight up, Rajon Rondo, right? And then he hits a game winner against the Celtics as a Laker with LeBron. I mean, that is just, that was disgusting. It was disgusting to see. And this time around, we have another superstar in purple and gold, or yellow, however you want to view it. Luka Doncic, he's in those colors now. And what I don't want to see is Luka Doncic have that great smile on his face and just talking all the shit he can to every single person in the front row. I can see Franco with his wig there, sitting there now, just giving the bird to Luka Doncic. And I can see all the Boston fans, GRD, everybody out there, right? I don't want to see Luka talking shit to the crowd. I don't want to see Luka smiling to the crowd. I don't want to see any good memories or moments for Luka Doncic and the Los Angeles Lakers in Luka Doncic's first game at the TD Garden as a Los Angeles Laker. That's what we saw from LeBron 6 years ago already. Crazy how long it's been since LeBron's been with the Lakers. 6 years ago already. I don't want to see the same thing happen with Luka Doncic coming to the Garden in the month of actually March. So we're not in February anymore. But in the month of March, I don't want to see Luka Doncic come to the Garden as a Los Angeles Laker and put up something that, or rather do something that he can put up on his wall later on in time and frame it and just have it there in his house. Oh, whatever, that time we beat the Celtics March at the Garden. Oh yeah, my first game as a Lake. Oh yeah, no, we're canceling out any of that against the Los Angeles Lakers. That's why this game is important.
and
not giving the Lakers anything to hang on their wall.
And Tatum does not like Luka. He does not like Luka one bit. And he was on the Jeff Teague podcast, and they were poking fun at him because Jeff Teague, he kind of knows behind the scenes of Tatum's thoughts. Tatum is not like Luka Doncic. He does not like a narrative driven that Luka's better than him. He doesn't like Luka. And now that guy's wearing purple and gold. I'm sorry. I'm excited. I'm sorry. When the trade happened, I got excited. It puts a smile on my face. And I can't wait for it. So again, a very exciting week ahead for the Celtics, and it should be something that hopefully we can come in, and again, a homestand is important for these guys, because they've struggled so poorly. So before we close out the show, I just got one more thing we got to talk about here. Now, the Celtics are a team in previous years, different core, I would say core, different fluff, I should say, that struggled at home in the playoffs, and they shot themselves in the foot. We're seeing a habit here of the Celtics now starting to kind of drop some games at home. Do we believe that could potentially leak into the playoffs?
I mean, it did last year a little bit.
Go ahead, Finn.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. I mean, 2 out of the 3 losses we had in the playoffs were 2 of them, the first rounds were home wins. So I think definitely it was also those games where we had, like we talked about earlier, to just the offensive shooting was just like at a standstill. And so I just think this season especially, we really got to step it up at home in the postseason because the previous year too we got a bunch of games against Miami too in that playoff series as well. So 2 of them were at home, and the last game 7 was at home. That was the closer. So they really got to find a way. If this is the best way to do it, is use this homestand as a tool to look into seeing how we can do with that.
Well, the at home stuff for the Boston Celtics, last season was kind of a rejuvenation of the Celtics at home, because in the past, I think the home crowds, really looking at it, have been a lot better in the past in terms of the noise, the ruckusness, and whether that's the playoffs or not, I think the home crowd was just a lot better at getting behind the team in the past than they are today. And I don't I to me, I look at it and go, well, last season we had our moments. Obviously, we started 20-0 at home. Denver was the team who actually snapped that home winning streak last year. But even in the playoffs, you think about game 1 when Kristaps Porzingis comes out to the floor, the whole crowd was going just absolutely berserk for Kristaps Porzingis when he ran out of that tunnel. And that was really a moment for the TD Garden in terms of the entire history of the Boston Garden, TD Garden, and the Celtics playing on the parquet floor. That was a moment in time when the Celtics took the floor in game 1 of the NBA Finals last year. Kristaps Porzingis was out there in the crowd. I mean, they didn't want to be anywhere but their seats for that occasion. And I think this season we've seen the team we've had good crowd moments, but they've really been few and far between, and the team can really take their foot off the gas at home. And I do think that could be something that affects the team come playoff time if they don't correct their wrongs or right their wrongs, particularly during this homestand. I think during this homestand, it's going to be a potential good booster to that home record. And maybe we're not talking about it as much afterward if we go 4-1 or 5-0 at home and we see that record uptick just a little bit after this next stretch, because I think if you can't win at home, you're kind of dicing with something dangerous in the NBA playoffs, because if you're not winning at home, you are relying on yourself to win on the road constantly, constantly, constantly. Because really talking about the road games, the Celtics are the road team, say in the conference finals or the finals. They really only have to win one road game. They have to win one road game in order to win the series. And then the rest of the home games, they can go out there and win. They can win 3 games at home. But if you win one road game, that's when you can win the series. But if you don't want a scenario, if you're the Boston Celtics, to have to win 2, 3, even a whole series, if you have to win the whole thing on the road, 4 games on the road, you don't want that scenario to come up because you're dropping games at home. And so that's where I look at it with the Boston Celtics this year and go, yeah, they're dealing with something a little dangerous here in terms of not being able to win at home consistently, because if you can't do that consistently in the playoffs, you're just relying on yourself more to win on the road more often, and you don't want to have to win 2, 3 games on the road. We know the Celtics can do it. They went undefeated on the road last year in the playoffs, but through that, they were also a very good home team, only lost 2 home games in the playoffs last year. That's what made them such a dominant team overall, is to win both on the road and at home. But if they're only winning on the road and dropping these home games, that gets into a dangerous area, because then you're having to go into somebody else's house for a game 7 potentially and go out and try to win that. We've seen the Celtics, they've done that in the past with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown led teams, most notably the Miami game 7 in 2022 to make the NBA Finals. But if you look at the stats of game 7s in history, the home team, it favors the home team by a wide margin. It really does. And you don't want to get yourself into a situation, if you're the Boston Celtics, to have to go into somebody else's home and their home crowd, their own gym, and have to win a game. We know the Celtics are fully capable of doing so, but in terms of making the job easier on themselves, making the margin of error bigger, if you're the Boston Celtics, just win at home. Just simply win ball games at home when your home crowd is out there supporting you. And if the Celtics can't do that, yeah, it's going to be a dangerous road for them in the playoffs. And we are going to see a couple of game 6s or game 7s if the Celtics cannot consistently win at home. And I think it'll leak into the postseason. I'm not gonna say that it fully is, but I'm gonna say I guarantee we lose at least one game at home in the postseason, as we have been known to do, both in the past and this season. We're just losing games at home, so I don't know. I don't see why we wouldn't lose a home game in the playoffs at some point in time. But to say it's going to completely leak, I don't think we're going to do something crazy like, oh, we'll drop 2 games on our home floor to start a series, or drop every home game on our floor for a series. I think it's more of in the, oh, is it going to be 1-1 in a series, or oh, maybe there's a game 5 and then it's 3-2. That could potentially happen, or rather, say game 5 we're up 3-1 and then it's 3-2, we're up on top. But I don't think it's going to entirely leak into the postseason, but I do believe that there could be a couple of games in there where it's a little dicier at home than we want it to be.
The last thing that I want to say is, when you look at the NBA Finals, a lot of it is just who is the more well-rested, healthier team. And if you lose home games and you push these series to 6 or 7 games, I mean, it adds up, right? You look at the 22 finals where the Celtics lost to the Warriors. I mean, there was just no more gas in the tank. The previous series against Miami went to 7. And the series against the Bucks went to 7. Versus last year, I mean, what was it? 5, 5, 4, and then 5 in the finals. I mean, just having less playoff games and getting it done early makes a big difference. By the time you're playing in the finals in June, and it makes a big difference. So you don't want to have these playoffs game series where you're going to 6 or 7 when it just doesn't have to be.
And you don't have that luxury anymore of, well, currently against 1 or 2 teams, right? Cleveland and Oklahoma. You don't really have that luxury of dropping 1 game and, yeah, home court's lost, but in reality, it's still 3 at your place, 3 at their place. You drop a home court, right? You're really in a hole. Those home court games could really be the ticket to you getting the job done. We talk about, let's not let a series get extended, right? We need to keep these guys, their legs fresh. They played a lot of basketball, 100 games last year. 3 of them went to the Olympics. They had that extra week and a half stretch in Abu Dhabi eventually, right? Just a lot of basketball for these guys recently. And those are crucial. Those games are crucial. So really the recipe right now for Boston is to steal one of the first 2 games on the road, right, and come back home and handle business. Now you're up 3-1. Okay, that's fine. They win game 5. Say you close it out on the road. Awesome. If you can't, you're coming back home for a game 6 and elimination at TD Garden. That needs to be their roadmap here. You can't dig yourself in a hole. God forbid they drop the first 2 games, right, and playing back 0-2. Those home games are even more crucial. Now, do I think it's going to leak into the playoffs? I don't. I again, you talk about that that switch and it getting flipped. I do think that they're going to turn it up another level. I will say this, TD Garden, show me something, man. You're not showing me anything. The fan base has been a little bit weak right now. Come on, we need we need a little bit more out of the guys. The fans at the TD. Again, the playoffs are right around the corner. I expect them to show up too. You know, us fans at the TD, we will show up when we need to. We're just saving it and our money in our pockets because, you know, right now it's quite expensive to go. That's why you should use our code Celtics Weekly at SeatGeek to get that money off. But yes, I don't think it's going to leak into the playoffs. I don't think this is a habit that is maybe it's contradictory that I'm saying this, but I don't think this is how that's going to show up. I don't. I think if this got a little complacent at home, I'd be very shocked come playoffs when it's time to get ready and rally for that back-to-back. They get complacent at the TD Garden, guys. I don't see that.
Sometimes I feel like it's in the personality of our team. Sometimes that they get the crowd behind them on some occasions, say in the first, second quarter. And we actually saw it the other day against the Cleveland Cavaliers, even in the third quarter. And then we kind of go, all right, nice. We've done it. We had our little moment here. The crowd got up, got on their feet. We had our little moment, timeout. Oh, yeah, we're walking over to the side. Now we're drinking Gatorade. We just did something good out there. And then they don't remuster it. We've seen other teams of the past, the Celtics teams, where there's been that remustering of, oh, we just went into the timeout. The crowd is going insane. The other team is frazzled. We're on top. We're going to keep bringing it to them. And I think about the Isaiah Thomas-led Celtics teams with Jay Crowder, Avery Bradley, Marcus Smart out there. those guys came out there after timeouts and just kept going, because it was in their DNA. It was in their nature to keep
Right.
doing that.
Right.
And I think these teams can be a little bit more complacent when you already have a ring. Some of your guys are paid. I mean, really the top five, the top starters, plus alongside with Al Horford, who's your, pseudo sixth man alongside Peyton Pritchard. All those guys are tremendously paid. They're all veterans in the NBA. They don't have as much of that underdog fight to themselves as Celtics teams had in the past, where they just were feeding off the crowd constantly and just making the crowd go insane because they were just constantly giving their effort 24/7. This Celtics team, they can kind of ebb and flow within their effort sometimes, and they can kind of have those little moments where they go, oh, the crowd's up on their feet right now. We did our job, and we can kind of kick back and let this ride a little bit. But then it doesn't ride because they play bad basketball. They give up 9-0 runs. They give up 7-0 runs. We see other teams get back into games, and then the crowd starts clinching a little bit because they realize, oh, we were just up by 20, and now we're up 9. Okay, we're up 10. And that's where I think this year's team in the playoffs. That's what's so it's a little weird talking about this team in some spots. It's really in the playoffs and throughout the rest of the regular season. It's really about their effort sometimes. It really is. And that's one of the main things about this particular Celtics team trying to go back to back. We know they have all the tools and the capability to play at a high level on both ends of the floor. That's not really the question. The question is, can they consistently bring their effort to do so against other hungrier teams than themselves? And that will dictate whether or not the crowd's going to stand up, whether or not they're good at home consistently. And that's the answer that we're kind of getting mixed results on this season, because we've seen horrendous portions of this season where the team goes back and forth. But then lately, we've been seeing it more in terms of the intensity and energy for the Celtics team. It's been playing out in a much better sense for the Celtics. And really these individual games, the past two games, we've seen it come out individually within games, but we know if they're just bringing that effort 24/7, like we saw at the beginning of that Cavaliers game, at the beginning of the third quarter in that Cavaliers game, and then at certain portions of this game today against the Denver Nuggets, the Celtics, they can be a team that breezes through the playoffs, but they have to breeze through the playoffs with their effort. They have to do it because that's what's going to get the home crowd up on their feet. Otherwise, this home crowd, I'm going to say this right now too about our home crowd and every NBA home crowd. The booing, it used to be a cardinal sin to boo your own team, okay? Straight up, unless they were doing something truly horrendous. Yet nowadays, it feels like you give up a 12-0 run and then the boo birds are out. That's just where we're at. 2021, I remember the team got booed for the first time in a while. And it was like, whoa, we're getting booed right now. Oh my, like we're 500 and getting booed. And ever since then, it feels like it's just like, 6-0 run, boo. It's like, what? Like we used to not boo at our own teams anymore. Like now it feels like there is this increased pressure to actually make the crowd satisfied within games, or even like when you're not, because we know the game of basketball, it's a game of runs. Like we're going to see runs throughout a game. It's not going to be a 20-point lead the whole game. You want to maybe keep some of that, of course, but you know that, all right, it's going to be 18, could be 16, could go down to 14 at some point, but you want to build that lead back up. Yet now it almost feels like it's so pressurized every time a team gets a lead, because the crowd, you do one little thing wrong, couple of possessions wrong here or there, and the boo birds come out. I don't know what it is. 2021 gave the leeway for everybody to do so, or with social media, I have no idea what it is nowadays. It used to be a cardinal sin to boo your team. Now there's an increased pressure for teams to perform constantly, because you do give up a 10-0 run and then all of a sudden the crowd hates you. That's supposed to be your home crowd. Just saying.
Yeah.
Well, guys, the Celtics, they'll have an opportunity here to get a little 2-day break before they're back in action, which is going to be this Wednesday, March 5th at 7 o'clock tip-off. Again, thank you, NBA. These 7 o'clocks, I'm liking them. I like stay away from the 8:30s. Give me the 7s and the 1s. Again, that's going to be against the Portland Trailblazers, guys, back home at the TD Garden, like I said. But as for tonight, guys, the Celtics, they snapped their 2-game losing streak. I say in parentheses because that's not a losing streak. However, they beat the Denver Nuggets 110-103. Again, Al Horford with a vintage Al Horford game. It was your SeatGeek player spotlight, 19 points, 8 rebounds, and 3 steals. Guys, after the final buzzer sounds on Wednesday night, head right back here to the Celtics Stock Weekly YouTube channel for CTW Postgame Live. Guys, again, Finn, thank you for coming on. Seamus, Brendan, for me, guys, you know the drill. Cue that music. It's a Celtics win. And until next time, go Seas.